Hey everyone, welcome into the Flippin' Hippos YouTube channel. I'm Star. Thank you for joining me today. If you're new here or you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel and don't forget to hit the thumbs up as you're listening today. With today's topic, you may be so inclined to hit the thumbs down as well, and that's fine. It's still interaction and I appreciate it. Oh, and we have a Facebook group called Flippin' Hippos Reseller Pod. You should join us over there. So today we're doing a Resellers Unpopular opinion video, and this is one that definitely has people on both sides and for very good reasons. I can see both sides, so I'm going to talk about both and I'm going to tell you what Keith and I do. Oh wait, what are we talking about? Taking measurements on clothing for your listings on eBay, Poshmark, Mercari, and other platforms. Do you take measurements? Should you take measurements? Which measurements should you take? There are folks who believe that you should be putting in pictures of your items with the yardstick or the measuring tape across. There are people who use Sizely, which shows a picture of where you measured. There are different schools of thought, even within the school of thought, that you should be adding measurements to every listing. So let's talk about why you should do measurements. Then we're going to talk about reasons why maybe you wouldn't want to. And then I'm going to tell you exactly what Keith and I do, which is not necessarily what is correct or what is right. It may even be a situation sometimes of do as I say, not as I do. But I'll get into all of that at the end. So first of all, we're going to talk about why it is a good idea to include measurements. The number one reason people will tell you is because you're going to get less returns. If folks can look at an item and see the size and the measurements, they can see that it's going to be a good fit, and they can then buy something that's going to fit them correctly, and you're going to have less returns. You're also going to have less messages and less questions. If you list items without measurements, buyers may send you a message asking you for measurements, and then you got to pull the item and take the measurements and answer the question anyway. So you're getting less returns. You're saving yourself time and hassle as far as answering messages and questions. The third thing is there are a lot of buyers out there who won't purchase without measurements. I've seen this discussion come up in Facebook groups over the years, time and again. And there are some sellers who are adamant that as a buyer, they will pass over items that don't have measurements. If they don't have them in there, how can I tell it's going to fit me? I'm not going to waste my time sending a message to the seller. So I'm just not going to buy it. Also, there are times when sizes may vary. So if you sell not antique, because that's furniture. If you sell vintage clothing, if you sell older clothing, sizes were different. So what was a size, 6 in 1970 is not a size 6 in 2023. Sizes were a lot different back then. And so you need to on those items absolutely include measurements, because someone who's not a clothing seller, somebody who's not a reseller may not be aware of that. You would hope that people who shop vintage clothing and wear it are, but not everyone is. Not everyone is a fashionista, guys. So you got a person who wants this cute vintage dress. They think they wear a size 6. They buy it. It doesn't fit. So if you sell vintage, yes, it is absolutely, I think, 100% necessary to put those measurements in, because the sizes are completely different than today's sizes. If you're selling clothing that is high-end, luxury brand, if you're selling them for a lot of money, then yes, include the measurements, because it's worth your time as a reseller to put those measurements in there. Luxury items, things that are selling for a lot of money, you want to take a little bit more time with, describe them better, put the measurements in. I'm not saying just throw your bread and butter items on the floor and take pictures next to the toilet and put them up wrinkled. But I am saying it makes sense to put the time and effort into items that are going to sell for more money. So those are really good reasons why you should be doing the measurements. We're going to talk about jeans as a whole separate entity in a minute. Most clothing I'm referring to when I'm talking now, I just mean like shirts and pants and skirts and dresses. Jeans are their own problem, and we do measurements on jeans. You could go to Old Navy right now and pull off the rack 5 brand new pairs of jeans in the same style, the same size, and lay them on top of each other, and they're going to be different sizes. I've seen pictures of this on the internet. I'm sure you guys have heard me talk about this before, but the way they're cut off the presses in the factories, even brand new jeans from the same brand, same style, same size, if you lay them on top of each other, you're going to have some that have a waistband that sticks out a little bit more, maybe a little bit longer of an inseam, maybe a little bit wider in the hips. It's just the way they're cut. And those are brand new. So if you think about used jeans, did they shrink in the wash? Have they been stretched out? So those measurements really need to be taken, because even if you know as a woman that you wear a size 8 in jeans, that size 8 that fits you so well and so comfortably and looks so great in American Eagle jeans is going to be too tight in Gap and too big in Gloria Vanderbilt and so on and so forth. Every size is going to be slightly different in every brand, even within the brands. And then when they're used, like I said, you come into, they've been washed, they've been worn, so they could be stretched out, they could shrink. Especially with women's sizes that go by the waist size, like men's, isn't necessarily going to be what the measurement is. I find that the higher end brands are better at having the same measurement as the size. Like Rock Revival size 32 jeans for men are going to measure 32 in the waist. But American Eagle jeans that are a size 24 for women may actually measure at a 22 or a 26. So it's super important to include those measurements so that a buyer isn't just assuming a size 28 is, and I have a 28 waist, is going to fit me, because that's not necessarily true. Also, there's, within women's jeans, there's petite, there's short, there's long. Everyone has different length legs, different length torsos. So including that rise and that inseam is super important too, because even if the waist is going to fit and the size is correct, every woman has to determine if it's going to fit her torso or her legs. I'm a very short person and I have very short legs. And my entire life, I've walked on my pants unless I bought petite or found something that fit really great. Most of the time, I can find jeans that fit great, but they're too long, and I just walk on them and deal with it. Some people don't want to do that. They want to find the petites and the shorts, the short legs. But jeans, they're super important just because of all of these differentials that can happen. And they are more expensive to ship. They are more expensive to get returns on because they're more expensive to ship. So I really, really encourage everyone, absolutely include measurements on jeans. You really want to cut down your returns on them because of how expensive they are to ship. And that includes a return shipping label if they didn't fit. Or a buyer, sometimes buyers are dishonest and they'll open an item that is described to get around paying that return shipping. We do not offer free returns on our jeans. We offer free shipping, but not free returns, because I'm not paying the shipping both ways. It's just too expensive. But we have had buyers open item as described dishonestly because they don't want to pay that return shipping. There's really no way around that because a dishonest person is going to be dishonest. But you can kind of avoid the returns for fit if you provide really great measurements. Not all buyers are going to look at measurements. Not all buyers read. I get messages every single day. Hi, can you tell me the inseam or the waist measurement? And it's like, it's all right there in the listing. But jeans are especially important to include measurements. I would say like the top 2 most important things to include measurements on, and this is just my opinion, but is the vintage clothing, because sizes are different now than they were then, and jeans, because there's so many variables. There's so many different different brands, and even within the brands, things can be weird, and everyone's got a different body type, and everyone wants their jeans to fit a specific way. So jeans and vintage, you should be doing measurements on. That's my advice. Now, we do not do any measurements on our men's shirts. 99.8% of the shirts that we sell are men's, and we do very few women's. We do have women's shirts. We do have women's skirts and dresses in the store, just items that have come from wholesale purchases, or when I'm walking through the thrift and I see something really great with that day's collar tag on sale. And we do scrub tops. We do scrub tops, but we do not do any measurements on our shirts. The reason why we don't is just sheer speed and volume and what we sell. The majority of the items that we sell, we pick up for 99 cents, and then we're selling for $12 to $20. So our men's shirts, on average, low end bread and butter is $12. High end can be $20, $25. And we're doing them in volume. It's a churn and burn. We're getting as much as we can for only 99 cents a piece. And we are listing high volume amounts and selling in high volume amounts. If we took the time to measure every single men's shirt, we would slow ourselves down immensely. And since our business is a volume-based business and it's all about the volume and getting as much listed and sold as possible, we always take speed into account and when we figure out our processes. We feel justified in this because men's clothing is a little bit different than women's. And other than the scrub tops and the few pieces sprinkled in here and there, like I mentioned, 99% of clothing other than jeans that we sell is men's shirts. Men's shirts typically will be true to size. If a man wears an extra large, he can pretty much guarantee he can buy an extra large in any brand and it's going to fit him. Women's clothing are their own world. They are a whole other monster. If you sell the majority of women's clothing, that was my cha-ching from this perfectly, I probably would tell you to rethink it, but I wouldn't measure them. So this is where I say you got to do what's good for you and for your business and what you feel is right, and maybe not always necessarily what I do, but I can tell you from our experiences and our opinions what we do. Most returns we get are not men's clothing. It's usually women's jeans, even though we do provide measurements there. Most men aren't going to return clothes. Again, it's universal pretty much. If a guy wears a size, he can buy it in any shirt, unless it's severely shrunk. Men's clothing doesn't have vanity sizes, all these different variables. Chico's is different than Torrid and all of that. Men's sizes are pretty straightforward and they are what they are. Men aren't as picky. Occasionally we'll get the message asking for measurements and we will gladly provide them if they are asked for. What I do is if we get a message from a buyer asking us for measurements on a shirt, even if they're only asking for like just the chest measurement, I'll go ahead and take the chest and the length, like the typical ones, and put it in the listing. That way, if that buyer that asked for the measurements doesn't end up buying, they're at least, I took the time to pull it. I took the time to measure that item, the shirt. So I'm going to go ahead and put those into the listing so they're there for future. But as far as being a part of our processes of photographing and listing men's shirts, measuring has just never been a part of that. I think in the very, very beginning, we were taking the measurements, but then we were like, this is cutting us our volume down so much. This is cutting into our time. And I think it would be different and we would think differently if we didn't do so much bread and butter and we weren't a volume-based business. If we sold only luxury brands, bolo brands, vintage clothing, if our average sale price was $50, it would be a different thought process. If we didn't pick up tons of volume at 99 cents that we are selling for $12 in a volume business, we may think differently, but it just doesn't equate to us to be worth the time spent to measure a $12 shirt, a $15 or an $18 shirt that we're just turning and burning in volume. That said, when we do get really nice shirts, expensive shirts, we will typically measure them, like the Robert Grahams, any of those other high-end brands. I always use Robert Graham as an example. But if we get high-end brands of men's clothing, we will take the time to measure it. Vintage clothing, absolutely, we will measure. I do measure all of our jeans, men's and women's, for all of the reasons stated before. But men's shirts, just not so much. Unless, again, there's a reason. A missing tag could be a reason. I forgot to mention that. Some clothing is missing a tag. So you can just take the measurement and put that in the listing and let the buyer know, hey, that tag is missing. Here's the measurements. There's also like a US standard size chart. I'll put the link to that below. Let me make a note to myself. There is a standard, and it's not standard for every brand or across the board, but there is a standard US size chart. So if your shirt's missing a tag and you measure the chest, you can look on the chart and see. And then I would just disclose that. I would put the size in the title, but in the description box, I always say, hey, the tag is missing from the shirt. We based the size based on the following measurements and standard US sizes. And that's all you have to do. So that is why we don't do measurements on all of our clothing, just because the time it takes for us to measure the low end bread and butter and how much it cuts down on our volume for us isn't worth it. We do measure jeans, high-end clothing, vintage clothing, anything missing a tag. We do measure a lot of the Lacoste, or however I say Lacoste, men's shirts, because their sizes are a little weird. But for the most part, no. But that's us. That's our volume. That's our bread and butter. Let me know in the comments, do you measure? What you measure? Everything? Just women's clothing? Just jeans? Why you measure? If you have any thoughts on, not measuring in a volume-based business, whatever. If you have any thoughts, comments, concerns, but I kind of want to take a little poll too. So let me know in the comments what you do. And other than that, go be productive. Go make some money, guys. Thanks for watching. Y'all are the best.